I'm here with my good buddy, David Herrera. Guys, welcome to this episode of whatever the heck it is that we're going to call this thing. Doesn't even need a name. All you need to know is that we're going to teach you about light, magnetism, cold, and the many different things that David Herrera has learned over the years. David, if you can kind of just start out by just explaining briefly what learning about electromagnetic fields, your light environment, cold, kind of what this has done personally for you, because I know that you struggled and you actually went all the way to the point where you moved from your home and those kinds of things. So I think it'd be a great place to start.
Yeah. So as far as learning about all of this, so I have been interacting and kind of part of Jack Cruz's member site for a long time, probably 2015. And so in the background, it was as simple as kind of like when somebody first hears about this type of stuff, it's like, oh, it's as simple as sunlight is good for you and you just get outside and it fixes everything, right? And for the most part, that is true until you have other things interacting with you, which is kind of what you brought up, which is, if you are living in the modern world, right, first world country, and you live in a city or not even necessarily a big city, right, just under modern technology, modern lighting, you start to possibly develop things that you might not have interacted. For me, my personal story was that I had a cell phone tower that was built literally right next to my house. And when I mean right next to my house, I mean not even 50 yards away, right? Literally my backyard and then on the other side of the fence. Yeah.
I just want to interrupt just for a second and mention, guys, David Herrera has totaled 11 times body weight. And he was on a mission to do another powerlifting meet and you just weren't feeling the same anymore. You weren't feeling great getting ready for a contest, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't something like I had been powerlifting for a while at that point, like 8 years, and then I had my best total ever, and then it was just shy of 2,000 pounds. So the goal was to total a little over 2,000 pounds at under 200 pounds. That was what I was preparing for. The cell phone tower got built literally because I would normally compete once a year, right? So I never was somebody that competed all the time. It was once a year usually because I still had a 9-to-5 job and that sort of thing. So I was preparing to compete a year after my best total. And the cell phone tower actually got built right at the tail end of my last competition, like 4 or 5 months before my last competition. And leading into the next competition is when I started to have problems, right? Just under recovery problems, tendon ligament problems, just kind of weird stuff. Almost felt like my joints were on fire, that sort of stuff. Weird things, right? Like that's the easiest way to describe it. It's stuff that hadn't happened before. I really didn't have a grasp of what was going on. And again, mind you, I knew about sunlight is good for you and all of that type of stuff, but I hadn't delved deep enough into the converse of that. What types of non-native EMF affect you and how do they affect you and that sort of stuff, right? Until I started to have problems. And immediately my first reaction was to stop everything that I was doing. I stopped taking any sorts of PEDs that I was taking and just reassessing, hey, what is causing this problem? And the more I removed, nothing really changed. The more I trained, nothing really changed. So I stopped training. And that's when I just flat out had a consultation with Jack Cruz. And then, he went through the whole, okay, well, it's more than likely an electromagnetic field problem. Asked a bunch of questions. It kind of slaps me in the face. Oh yeah, there's a cell phone tower right outside my freaking house that just recently got put there. Right. And then had my house tested. And sure enough, it was a lot. Now there are no guidelines in America for non-ionizing radiation. What does that mean? It means that radiation that doesn't burn you is not classified as dangerous. That's what it means. Okay? Like as far as like removing all the scientific talk, that's what it means. If it's not burning you, if it's not causing heat to happen, then it's totally fine. That's how the rules are set. So obviously, it doesn't take that much of thinking to go, well, that's probably wrong, right? There's got to be a much smaller threshold considering that our whole uh, our whole body is set up as an electrical being, right? Your brain communicates with the rest of your body through nerves and neurons. They are sending electrical signals. You're not, how would I say, encapsulated, right? You're not shielded from the electromagnetic fields of the sun, for example. That's actually a beneficial electromagnetic field. You're not shielded from the electromagnetic fields of your own body, meaning when you move, you create electricity. You not only through your nerves, but your collagen system, your tendon system, those are all piezoelectric. Your bones are piezoelectric. And what that means is when they flex or become under load, they create electricity as well. It's kind of like a feedback mechanism. And so it's not hard to understand that low-level electromagnetic fields from cell phones, cell phone towers, are also interacting with your body. That is happening. Is it always negative? It depends on the strength and it depends on the duration, right? Those types of things matter more than, oh, cell phones are bad or, oh, Wi-Fi is bad. You can totally use these types of things. And if it's very sporadic in your daily life, you're not going to notice much. But if it's, in this case, a cell phone tower that never turns off, that's always at full strength all the time, which is what was happening, then you end up with problems, right? And so that's when I dug into it a lot more, started learning about how cold exposure can mitigate some of these things. That's what really got me into cold exposure, because that's the one thing that I know, because I had to live next to my cell phone tower for a little over a year, maybe a little less by the time I sold the house. A little over the year, right? Because it took me a little while to actually figure out that it was the cell phone tower. Then the measurements and all of that type of thing happened, and then finally listing the house and getting it sold. So it was a little over a year. And that whole time,
you had your house tested.
Yes.
How did you go about doing that? Is there like a service or a company that people can kind of reference?
So I used a company called Live EMFs Safe. That's the company that I used to come and test it. But if you were to Google building biologist, that's the technical name for somebody. They don't just do electromagnetic fields. They do radon. They do all kinds of surveys of like leaching of fumes into the basements and stuff like that.
Maybe
so they do all
like that.
Including mold, black mold. They test all of that stuff. So they're not just about electromagnetic fields, but that is in one of the things that they test. So a building biologist, if you were to Google it, you would find a building biologist pretty much in any state that I've Googled, helping people through my coaching services and stuff like that. But yeah, I hired a building biologist. The particular one that I used was Live EMF Safe, Anthony from there, and had them test it, and it came back really, really, really high in terms of what's safe. Now, coincidentally, there is a country, Canada, that has done these types of studies on cell phone towers, and they do have guidelines of how much is safe in terms of they can't see detectable changes in biology in cells when the microwatts are below 100 microwatts per meter squared. So that's considered safe from their guidelines. My house was 80,000 microwatts per meter squared all the time, right?
You're living in a microwave.
Yeah, and if you round that, if you convert that to watts, it's like a half a watt, right? So even if you were to say it into something that somebody comprehends, a half a watt, how bad can that be? It's not really about the cooking part, right? It's not about the cooking part. It's always interacting with cells, and cells, when they are interacted by any type of electromagnetic field, they have a stress response. Sunlight creates a stress response. That stress response from sun is hormetic, meaning the right amount of stress creates a positive outcome. Just like weight training or any type of training that somebody might do. If you do too much, it's always bad. That's just kind of how it goes. But if you do the right amount, it's an improvement. That is how you want to start looking at these types of things in terms of electromagnetic fields, lack of sunlight, that sort of stuff, because they affect the mitochondria sometimes in positive ways and sometimes in negative ways depending on the type of electromagnetic field and the duration and strength of that electromagnetic field. Because, for example, if you live in Alaska, in the summertime when the sun is up all the time, you end up with neurological problems. You end up with that exaggerates schizophrenia. So it's never like all the time. Hey, sunlight is always good for you. You can overdo that if you live in certain parts of the world. Just like darkness, too much darkness. So it's always about almost like Chinese medicine, where there's always a yin and a yang. There's always the right amount of both. And that is probably the most crucial. Now, when it comes to man-made electromagnetic fields, we haven't really found anything besides like temporary use of them, like stimulating, like pulsed magnetic fields and things of that nature that can help biology, like get you out of pain, like I forget the acronym, but it's
potentially grounding mats, potentially red light. These are all like man-made things that could potentially be more on the positive side of helping your mitochondria.
Yes. And so that's where the devil is in the details, right? Like, what exactly are you, for example, let's talk about red light, right? It's pretty simple to understand that red light therapy has been very popular in America, and certain frequencies of red light actively interact with the mitochondria and create the right environment inside of a mitochondria to make more ATP. And they facilitate what's called easy water. So it basically allows the cellular water inside of cell membranes to have more electrical potential. That's all good, considering you are an electrical being. So anytime that you have a better electrical potential inside your cells, you're essentially going to be able to communicate better. And I always say communicate, and people kind of get, lost a little bit of like, oh, your brain's telling your pancreas and all that, that is the communication I'm talking about, but it's happening so fast. There's a specific seconds for it. Like, it's not even nanoseconds, it's femtoseconds, right? So it's happening at light speed, essentially, right? And so that is why it's crucial to understand that electromagnetic fields, even if they're throwing off the communication part of cells by 3 or 4 femtoseconds, that matters to cells because they're operating at such a microscopic scale that a femtosecond makes a difference on the coordination of when your body is supposed to do certain regulatory processes in the body. Like there's charts out there that people can look at and be like, oh, sex hormones get created at this time of the day. Thyroid hormones get created at this time of the day. People are assuming that the body has something etched somewhere that says, oh, at 9 p.m., we're going to make thyroid. At 2 a.m., we're going to convert T4 to T3. That's not really how it works. How it's coordinated is the lack of light and the presence of light and the types of light are what coordinate when those are supposed to happen. So under natural conditions, let's just talk about melatonin, for example, right? That's easy. You're wearing some blue light blocking glasses. You're going to get a melatonin release whenever luminosity goes down. So just the intensity of light and the absence of blue light, for sure. That is a timing mechanism because before there was a lot of artificial light, the sun went away, melatonin came up. That was just a known thing in biology. Now, when you can undo that synthetically, well, guess what? Melatonin doesn't get released if you're stimulating yourself with blue light at night. So what does that imply? It doesn't just mean that you're not going to go to sleep very well. Melatonin is also a signaling hormone for the rest of the hormones that are supposed to happen later that evening, right? So it's think of it like those machines like where you tip a domino and then it flies around and then hits a whole bunch of other things. That's what melatonin is. So you essentially stop that whole mechanism from ticking everything off at the right time of the day when you interfere with it with light. Light is the most powerful indicator of what time of day it is for the biological system. And the cells that are paying the most attention to that are mitochondria.
How would you appropriately use specific types of glasses? Because right now I kind of have like orange/reddish glasses. It's only about 2 p.m. here in California. Would it be better at this point for me to wear like the yellow glasses to block a little bit less blue light? Or like, yeah, what are some of your thoughts on like, how do we use these different shades and colors of glasses?
Well, so number one, if you're ever outside, no glasses, even if they're shaded, right? If you're indoors, right, the way I look at it is most people these days, unless they've gone out of their way to change their lighting in their home and that sort of stuff, most people have way too much blue light interacting with them. And that's a problem all by itself, because it destroys dopamine production at the eye. It makes eye changes happen, especially in younger humans and children and stuff like that. So I would say by default, anytime you're inside, I would always wear at a minimum yellow or orange to block as much blue light as you can, because you're already getting way more than you need. Right. Then just to put that into perspective, if you were to just spend a whole day outside, you are getting blue light with red all the time. And that blue light wanes and waxes throughout the day, and the red light is present from sunrise to sunset. So that's the difference there. You're not getting a constant blue irradiation throughout the day, but you are getting a constant red. You basically flip that on its head whenever you're indoors. You're getting a constant radiation of red, and only when you wear something that blocks blue light, or when you add, like what I got going on, you add red to the environment. That's the only time you get red in an indoor environment. So I would say at a minimum, yellow and orange inside when you're working in front of screens and that sort of stuff. You should always try to subtract as much blue as possible. Once it gets dark, then I go as far as red light glasses are a must if you're trying to improve sleep, right? At a minimum, the red light glasses. You can kind of circumvent them if the light that you're using is not blue, right? So if it's not blue, then there's no need.
You mean red glasses?
So, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah.
I meant blue blocking glasses, which would be red.
Yeah, I do the same. I do the same shit all the time. Why is, let's kind of boil this down for people a little bit. Like we just hear mitochondria thrown around so much, and in 2025, hopefully people can really learn what it is and learn why it might be important to try to optimize it. So what is mitochondria, and what are some good, easy ways that we can optimize it?
Yeah. So mitochondria are in all of your cells except for red blood cells, and they essentially provide the energy for the cell through ATP and through the processing energy. And when I say processing energy, that can mean food, but it doesn't always include food. It can be processing red light, for example, that they have cytochromes in them that are tuned to specific wavelengths of light. One of them is red. That's why it improves ATP production. And so essentially they are like in science class when you were in 8th grade or whatever, they are the powerhouse of the cell, right? People kind of just like say that, and then that's kind of where they leave it. But mitochondria are a microbe. They are a bacteria that we have essentially stolen and integrated into our cells to provide energy, right? They are the thing that is processing your carbs and your fats. But they don't have carbs and fat. All your food turns into a molecule or two molecules, NADH and FADH. All of your food turns into those. And those donate electrons to the electron transport chain, and you're essentially turning food into electricity. That's what your mitochondria is doing. And then that electricity powers processes like ATP production and electron flow and hydration of the cell, creating water, cellular water. So you always essentially want to make sure that your mitochondria are able to do that as effectively as possible. And one of the ways to do that is through things like making sure that you optimize the ability to tell time, because the mitochondria are involved in every process of the cell. So it needs to know what time of day it is so that it can optimize a specific process. When it's daytime, it's going to optimize daytime processes, right? Being active, being mentally functioning, not having brain fog, those types of things. So the crucial one for that is as simple as get some type of morning daylight. What that means is don't have any glass between you and the outside world, and get 10 to 15 minutes of it. Those are minimums. Those are not optimization. Those are, if you don't already do that, will you notice an effect? Yes, you will, because it'll start to tune your body to the right time, to the point where if you're very regular about that, you start to wake up before your alarm, before things start to kind of wake you up. You start to already wake up because your mitochondria is also responsible for cortisol production. That's the hormone that's going to raise body temperature and things of that nature to get you active for the day. So just exposing your eyes and face to daylight that is not obstructed by glass is definitely step number one. Low-hanging fruit. It gets complicated when you got shift work and stuff like that. We won't get into that. But for most people, it's as simple as in the morning, the first 2 to 3 hours of the day, you want to get some daylight interacting with your eyes and face. Secondly, you can enhance mitochondrial efficiency. Now, this is actually directed to like actual energy production, right? Through the process of ATP and cold thermogenesis and stuff like that. Two things that can happen there. Infrared light, so from the sun or synthetically, can improve ATP production and improve mitochondrial function while you're doing those things. Cold exposure does the same thing. It upregulates the efficiency of the mitochondria to create heat and create ATP and those types of things. When you do that, when you optimize mitochondria and raise it through cold, for example, you also end up creating neurotransmitters like dopamine and things of that nature. When you do it through sunlight, you actually end up doing a few other things like cleaving POMC, P-O-M-C, pro-opiomelanocortin. That does a whole lot of things like producing alpha MSH, which is the base hormone that most people know as melanotan. It also does some things with improving immune factors and things of that nature. So you get a whole lot of benefit from having a simple tanning session with sunlight or a cold exposure session if there is not, good, strong sunlight out where you live. So it really comes down to where do you live, which one do you lean into, and the time of year, right? For me, I live in Wyoming, so it's not really the time of year for me to get a tan. I can try, but all I'm going to do is get cold exposure, right? And so I just lean into cold exposure. Come 2 or 3 months from now, the sun's strong enough, and I start to get a tanning session going on. Another thing is increasing oxygen utilization. So aerobic training, right? And now aerobic training doesn't have to be cardio. That's kind of a misnomer. Like, for example, deep sea divers, free divers, they do a lot of aerobic training. They don't do any running or cycling. They do it through breath holds, breath training. Those types of training increase oxygen utilization. Another way to say that is CO2 tolerance. Increasing your CO2 tolerance is beneficial for mitochondrial efficiency to process oxygen, because at the end of the day, burning food or taking food and turning it into electricity, which is what mitochondria are doing through the electron transport chain, requires an electron acceptor, which is oxygen in this case. So you want to be able to bring oxygen to the mitochondria as efficiently as possible. We don't actually have an oxygen sensor. The thing that dictates our breathing and cadence and breath turnover is actually CO2 tolerance. That's what our body is monitoring. How much CO2 is in the system dictates how often you need to breathe. So raising CO2 tolerance means that you can oxygenate tissues better. So it's kind of like inversely related, which is, what that type of training does.
I want to note that this can easily be done by, going on a walk. Maybe for some of our listeners, maybe they might need to have a little bit of a weighted vest or something like that. But going on a walk and just participating and doing some nasal breathing is probably a great way to activate some of what you're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. Low hanging fruit is just go for a walk, do some nasal breathing. You can be sitting and doing nasal breathing as well, right?
Sleeping with mouth tape.
Yep, just mouth tape, nasal breathing only for 10, 15 minutes. If you want to make that harder, some people might be fit enough that that's super easy, right? You can definitely make sitting on your couch a very hard training session by doing some box breathing, for example, nasally only, right? Tape your mouth, do nasal breathing, do box breathing through your nose only. That's a whole nother level of this is hard breathing. This is an exercise at this point. You might even break a little bit of a sweat if you do it correctly, just sitting on the couch. And that is a major improvement in oxygen utilization and that sort of stuff. So that is a big one for mitochondrial health. There's a reason why bodybuilders tend to, not all, but tend to, prioritize their cardiovascular work when they want to burn body fat. Burning body fat requires mitochondria to work effectively. If you improve that, you'll burn body fat easier. This is one of those mechanisms that will do that.
I want to point something out that you're a lot of times for listeners that don't know, the listeners that might not follow David is outside. It could be 4 degrees outside, and he is on his elliptical in his underwear for anybody who wants to view it on his OnlyFans page. But he's out there. He's getting some sunlight. He's also getting some cold exposure. I would imagine like the UV isn't super high, but you're still getting a lot of the benefits of the sun and seeing the sun in the eyes and getting that kind of morning sun. But as the summer starts to come, or as it starts to get a little bit warmer, where you live, you're at a pretty high altitude. So you are getting like multiple benefits. A question I have for you, do you think that in 2025, 2026, we're going to start to see some gyms that maybe employ some of these methods of like, to me, it makes sense to have a cardio room that's cold, maybe a cardio room that's 55 degrees and either has like a sunroof of some sort, to allow some actual real sunlight to come in, or that has maybe some red light in it.
Yeah. I mean, those are all hacks that I have personally helped arrange. If people have the money and the willingness to do that type of thing, those are all hacks that are very, very valuable. And in fact, there are, athletes and professional athletes and things of that nature that have exploited this whole CO2 tolerance thing to the maximum and use CO2 machines. There are athletes that have exploited that to the maximum and swim in cold water to upregulate their ability to train what they're trying to do as far as aerobic capabilities and things of that nature. So that is all part of possibilities as far as like specialty gyms that could look into that type of thing for sure. And then, so what I just mentioned as far as like augmenting or not even augmenting, like optimizing your mitochondrial function, those are kind of the low hanging fruit that anybody can do, and everybody should do some or all of those types of things. And then you have to have the yin and the yang, right? These are things that you do in addition or kind of work around to get good mitochondrial health or keep and preserve mitochondrial health. There are other things that you do in the evening that keep and preserve mitochondrial health. One of them is, what you got on your face there, some blue light blocking glasses to reduce the amount of blue light so that the mitochondria can actively tell, hey, we're going into nighttime. Certain processes need to be optimized at that point in time, and it can clearly tell and start switching those things. Other things are reducing non-native electromagnetic fields in your bedroom specifically, right? You don't have to go out of your way and, try to shield your whole house and all of that. There might be circumstances where you want to do that. But at a minimum, you start making your bedroom a sleep sanctuary. Now, that's not really foreign. Most, there are studies out there, hey, keep your room cold. Make sure that everything is dark. Make sure that you don't have any lights in the room, that sort of stuff. All of that is great. But people forget that Wi-Fi and phones are also a type of light. When they say remove all light, they're not just talking about the light that your eye can see. They're talking about the full electromagnetic spectrum. So smart TVs in the bedroom, make sure they get turned off. Your cell phone, try not to sleep with it, at least not right next to your head. Maybe have it charge, at least 6-7 feet away from you, or put it on airplane mode, things of that nature. Anything that you can eliminate from the sleeping area improves sleep. You can track that through various methods and things of that nature.
I'd like to interject too. Like, I want you guys to consider all these things. Maybe you just do some of them one by one and you just see if you have any improvements in anything. Some of them are so simple and so easy, like chucking on a pair of glasses. It's like, it's just such a small ask. Just try it and see. Like, you might notice, you might say, hey, I was a little sleepier at the right time. I went to bed at 9:30 instead of 11:30, and that was kind of nice. So you might just notice like these small changes. And for some of you that don't really have much symptoms, like I said, the things that are the low hanging fruit here that are so simple, I would say start with those. However, if you have symptoms and you just have low energy, you're not sleeping well, like just everything seems to be falling apart, do your absolute best to incorporate as many of these things as you can. You don't need to just try to shift to doing this overnight, because you might feel like a failure if you do that. If you're like, man, I can't keep up with all the different things that they said, so you say the hell with it, and then you don't do any of them. So just in my experience, and David probably had a similar experience, and probably everyone you've ever helped probably had similar experiences, you do this step by step, and you start to do what you can do. And you start to go, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, this is actually doing something. Every once in a while, there might be something that you try where you're like, I don't know if I noticed much change from that. But that's okay. You keep going through, you keep skimming through, and you keep finding the things that are going to eventually work and benefit you the most.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, these are just like the things that when I first do a consultation with somebody that's never heard about any of this type of stuff, this is kind of what I lay out. And exactly like you said, hey, what fits your schedule? What are you already kind of doing? Like, for example, in my opinion, just about everybody commutes to work in the morning, right? A simple hack that gets kind of a lot of these all at once is rolling down your window on your way to work, right? You roll down your window. If it's cold outside because the season is cold, guess what? You're going to get daylight and you're going to get cold exposure. When you roll up the window, you're going to get warm right away. It's not like you went out in the middle of a blizzard. And when it's warm outside in the summertime, you roll down your window and guess what? The sun's probably already been up for an hour. You're going to get possibly even a little bit of UV light at that point in time, depending on when you're commuting to work, and you're going to get daylight exposure at the same time. That is a simple, low-hanging hack that kind of catches a lot of things for the morning time, setting the clock correctly for the morning. And then in the evening, simply starting with a pair of glasses. Those two things usually end up manifesting enough of a change that people start looking more and more into mitochondrial health.
Awesome, man. Well, I think we gave people a lot there. We gave them a lot to chew on, and David and I can talk about these things kind of forever and ever. And with the amount of work that David and I are doing and the amount of communication that we have, you would almost think that we're solving some cancer over here or something like that. But we're just some meatheads, some knuckleheads, just messing around with different things in the sun. For those of you that haven't had a chance to check out David with Juji Mufu, I thought that was really cool. That's on YouTube. I've also interviewed David many times. We've talked about many different things, and so we're going to continue to communicate with him. This is just a chunk of some things in terms of mitochondria, and there was one little chunk that I guess we did maybe skip over, and that is methylene blue. I know that one thing that people should know about David Herrera is that he doesn't oftentimes start out any sentences or any work that he ever does with anybody with supplement. He usually starts out with, and that's what I really thought was awesome about the work that you're doing, is that most often you start out with like an action. You start out with like a thing, like, oh, I'm going to do it. To me, that makes a lot of sense. And then sometimes supplementations can really help with augmentation. You do have a supplement company where you sell like injectable L-carnitine and methylene blue and some of these things that help you along. So you just figure that that's where you would start, because a lot of people are like trying to sell products and so forth, but that's not where you normally start. You normally start with the lifestyle habits, and I think that's really important. But what the hell is the deal with methylene blue?
Yeah, so methylene blue is a medical dye. Okay, so that is what it is, but it has been used a lot way back, starting in the Soviet Union and that sort of stuff. And then from there, even by our own Navy, for a few things, right? Methylene blue does a few things at the mitochondrial level. It is a chromophore for red light. What does that mean? It means that attracts red light, specifically 660 red light. So 660 nanometer red light gets attracted to methylene blue more. Methylene blue is also an electron donor. So remember what I said earlier in the conversation about all food turns into electrons and your body's always trying to collect more electrons. Methylene blue is a synthetic way to donate electrons without electricity directly to the mitochondria. And because it's a specific dye, it actually interacts with cytochrome 4, which happens to also be a red light chromophore. So it enhances cytochrome 4. Cytochrome 4 is where oxygen goes for the electrons to come over to it. And then there's an interaction there that makes CO2 and water. CO2 you breathe out, the water stays in the cell, and it's special water. And it essentially upregulates that cytochrome. So it increases electron transport chain, essentially. And it can temporarily fix faulty mitochondria, like if your mitochondria are inefficient, right? Or you're in a inefficient mitochondria for your environment, right? It also works the other way. If your environment is bad for you, this can help offset some of the negatives for that. I will have to say that methylene blue, if you have an SSRI, because it can act like an SSRI, if you're taking an SSRI, you don't want to be taking methylene blue. There is a medical interaction there. It's not just blanket statement, everybody should take it. Even though some countries like Russia basically said that. Basically, in fact, they still do that. Methylene blue is readily available without a prescription just about in every country. But that is essentially what it does, right? And now, it also is an antiseptic. It actually has properties that are antibacterial and antiviral. And that has to do with the electron donation part, right? So electrons are electricity, right? So our membranes in our mitochondria are a little bit different than bacteria and viruses and things of that nature. So whenever electrons are donated to a bacteria or a virus, it actually kind of dies because it's getting overloaded with electricity. Essentially, that's what's going on. That's how it acts as an antiseptic, an antibacterial. But for our mitochondria, it's actually helpful in that way. And
interacts with red light, interacts with cold too as well.
Yeah, because cold upregulates your own body's ability to make its internal red light. That's what makes you a warm-blooded mammal, right? Is you're creating red light. And people don't understand that red light, far infrared, is heat. Near infrared is also a type of heat. Then you have near infrared, so far, mid, and near infrared, different versions of infrared. The closer you get to near, the more it's just a color, but the farther away, it's actually heat. So as you produce more heat from cold exposure, you're actually increasing red light production at the mitochondrial level. If you have methylene blue on board, you're assimilating more of that. You're not wasting it as much of it as heat. You're assimilating it more for water production and electron flow and things of that nature.
In the comments below, let us know if you guys want David to ever fill you in on some Bitcoin stuff. I realize that's a pretty big departure from fitness, but David does have a pretty good knowledge about Bitcoin, so that might be an interesting thing to talk to him about. And speaking of Bitcoin, he does have a website where, like I mentioned, he sells methylene blue and L-carnitine and some other products. It's called darylstrength.com, correct?
Yes.
And that's where he accepts his Bitcoin. And then if someone wants to follow up with you to try to get some consulting or contact you in any other way, is there a way for them to try to reach out to you?
Yeah. So my Instagram, so David Herrera 1119, or the simplest one is the Solar Athlete. That's also an Instagram. And if you go to just my bio, there's a link there. It takes you to a website. And that's where you can book a consultation. You can hire me just for the consultation or actual coaching. If you actually have a problem that you need to get, help working through and that sort of stuff. So yeah.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later. Bye.